Yo, it's good. So this is going to be a new type of video I'm planning to put out. I'm going to say weekly, but like, look, I'm going to be real. That's not going to happen. I'm just going to get a bunch of different people that I really like talking to, and I'm going to talk to them about speedrunning stuff, and I'm probably going to put either some runs or some practice in the background, and that's going to be the format, and you're going to freaking love it. So yeah, today my friendly visitor is Mobius. Hello, Mobius.
Good morning, I
Mornings.
say, at 8 o'clock in the evening. Wherever you are in the world, it's morning.
Yeah, true, because this will be going up like midnight, which means there's actually a higher chance it's afternoon for them when it goes up.
But yes, do you want me to do an introduction of myself?
Yeah, tell us about yourself. Tell us about your
Oh,
speedrunning
God.
credentials.
Well, apparently I'm retired, but I am someone who has speedrun a majority of the Ratchet and Clank games, and I did so for a good 6 years. And some will say I was wildly successful and made a lot of money doing it. Um,
And
but
others
that's
would
beside
speak
the
the
point.
truth.
Yes, others would speak the truth. I'm at least one of those things. But
Yeah, you still have many records at the moment, don't you? I mean, you obviously have all
not
the deadlock aisles,
yeah.
but
Like if we're splitting hairs here, I guess like I have all the ILs because I still keep up with the ILs in the games that I run. But otherwise, no. The everyone's caught up, especially Yugi.
mm,
So
I mean,
you
Yugi's
know,
been working very hard. We'll probably
yes,
talk about that later, actually, but
yes,
yeah.
good
Um,
point. But anyway,
Point being, you've had a long history of world records in a lot of the future series and a lot of the games that are frustratingly less well accepted in not less accepted, but
mm,
less well known in the community, and they've been absolutely getting developed. And I would personally credit a lot of that to you over many
well,
years,
thank you for that.
which leads nicely into our first point that I want to talk about, which is this was submitted in actually, and it was the thought process that goes into creating a route or a strat. Because I think a lot of people don't recognize that it's not just like you're, trudging along and then all of a sudden you're like, haha, here's a strat, right?
Yes, correct.
And it's different for everyone, which is actually curious because I mean we've talked about it briefly privately in the past, but I'm curious to hear on your sort of process to take something from an idea that you might have dreamt up. I don't really care how you came up with the idea, but how you take an idea into testing and what sort of stuff you're looking for to then actually turn it into a strat.
Yeah, that's interesting because pretty much my very first contributions to the games. Well, I was playing Tools of Destruction, which is the first of the PS3 Future games, and the route for it was quite underdeveloped. Like when we're considering like the holistic sort of Ratchet and Clank series and the end of 2015 when I started running, I would probably say that Tools of Destruction was, bottom five in terms of development, despite the fact that it had like such good foundational movement tech. Like just as an example, you have the Razor Claws, which are like a melee weapon, but you can use them to wall climb and like dash across the sky and get a bunch of speed and all that. And that kind of potential was sort of overlooked because people were so well. The first things I noticed about the people that routed the game in the first place is that they sort of just went quickly through the casual path. They didn't see the perspective of the planets and like how much you can crunch it to point A to point B movement. And I think that is like the most essential element of routing is you need to diagnose exactly what you need to do in a particular area or just throughout the entire game to complete it. And once you have this like list of processes, uh, that's when you actually like delve into what's possible, what do I have available to me to start getting to places quicker. Do I go out of bounds in this area? Do I just time going through the casual route and seeing like, oh, can I do this quicker than like coming up with a convoluted solution that might be a straighter direct line? Like you have to, especially in a 3D game, you have to understand the geometry of what you're working with, and then you have to understand the mechanics of whatever glitches or movement tech um,
The
before you even
limitations
start.
of it.
Yeah, before you even start routing. Like I probably spent a lot of time just practicing and learning the game and what people already knew beforehand before I actually delved into trying to make things faster, because you sort of need to get this like footing and understanding of uh, what the speedrun is beforehand before
Yeah.
you can actually work on it. A lot of people try and skip that step. They try and go like, "Oh, this looks slow. I'm going to just throw my head at it, and like maybe something will happen. Like maybe I'll clip through a wall or something." Like,
Yeah.
yeah, you can
And
brute force things, but it's not. I don't really recommend it because like uh, routing is routing is like a cerebral sort of like you need to connect a bunch of ideas at once to discover something. Like it's not just a lot of things don't happen in isolation when it comes to routing. Like so much information you get, especially in Ratchet and Clank games, you will get it from other planets and other things that people have done in the past, videos you see of glitches, and you will apply that somewhere else
mm,
uh, to skip something.
it's a great point because so often you get these people, and I imagine, obviously, I wasn't there at the time, but as you touched on, there was all of this really crazy tech. Like there was razor climbing. I'm not sure when the whips was discovered, but
Yeah,
there was
that was already discovered
that
as
was
well,
known
like
already.
ages
Yeah.
beforehand as well.
So you had all this crazy tech, which of course now we look back on with hindsight and we say, how did you not realize you could do all this stuff? But I mean, hindsight's 2020. But you
Yeah,
look at it, and at the time, it's so common with the early routes in games to just not truly understand what things can do. Like I think Rift Apart is a great example of this because day one, well, I think it was day one, we found wrench boosting, which is
yep.
obviously
Within 24 hours.
ridiculous, right? And within like, a few hours of me finishing the game and actually strat hunting, I started posting all these things. I'm like, obviously I had a completed file, so cutscenes weren't active, and that's how a lot of people were strat hunting, right? They were doing it with
Mhm.
these completed files, and we were like, man, this game's gonna be crazy. We've got like ship to boss on torrent, like all this kind of crazy stuff. But that was very ignorant from me, for example, because, well, we didn't understand that this was going to be a Ratchet game that, unlike the rest, is quite linear. You have objective A, which needs to be done before objective B, objective C, and so on, which is interesting because it changes the theory of routing. Because what you're talking about a lot with Todd and how we've often approached all of the Ratchet games up until Rift Apart has been very, if you can get to the end of the planet in a straight line, that's the fastest because the
Correct.
objective will be there, right? And so that is
Yep.
essentially the most pure form of routing. How can I create a straight line moving as quickly as possible towards the end of the planet and then back, which in Ratchet's case is often a teleporter. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting, right? And I also think it was great what you touched on about the level of the player almost strat hunting, because you get so many people coming in. They're like, "Oh, I don't want to strat hunt because I feel like I won't be useful." And while that isn't inherently true, right? We've definitely had discoveries from people that, to put it bluntly, don't know much about the game.
Yes.
But it definitely helps, right? Because if you throw an idea at someone who has years of experience, right? Like if you throw an idea at you, for example, for pretty much any of the future series, or you throw an idea at me for no IMG, right? I have the experience. I can probably whip over that idea when within 5 minutes have a rough idea of whether it's feasible or not, right?
Yeah,
But
correct.
if you don't have that understanding of the game and the engine and just basic routing theory, then it's so difficult to take any idea and actually translate it. As you said, you have to have an idea of that route. I mean, I guess a
Yeah.
great way I can talk about it is, obviously I have spent years and years strat hunting for NG plus categories. And I found it difficult when I went to APB because so often I'd be like, oh, here's this better movement you can do here. Oh, here's this faster pack movement. Here's this chain you can do with the charge boots. And then so often it was like, yeah, but then you're skipping these bolts and this bolts and this bolts. And it's like, quite a change in the theory. So it's interesting how it changes from category to category and game to
Yeah,
game
yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
No, that's really it. Like, not every Ratchet game has something completely different in terms of considerations. Like, there is nothing that is identical between the games when when you're thinking about like how to approach routing. Like, even between Rack 2 and Ouya,
Which is the
they
most commonly, these games are the same sort of comment.
yeah, like whether disregarding that sort of argument, that you can make a very clear like distinction saying, hey, this game has, sorry, not a distinction, like you can draw a correlation between them in saying like you need to get the coordinates, you have charge boots, you have whip jumps in some capacity, you have
Yeah.
whatever, you have clipping.
The obvious
Uh,
like visual similarities and even
yeah,
engine similarities for that matter.
yes, yeah. So like that, for the most part, like you can say Rack 2 and Ouya, you're going towards the same end goals in each
Yeah.
planet. You're either getting coordinates or you're killing a boss. That's about it, you know? Um, but Ouya has one really big difference, which is why Quid Exploit is was such a huge discovery for that game and not for Rack 2. And that is because uh, you had the big comics and items such as the master plan, which would give you coordinates, and that's
Yeah.
like that's the first major breakthrough. Well, I guess the first major breakthrough was buying gadgets from the vendor in Ouya, but then the master plan stuff, and when we actually cracked the code on Quid Exploit, that was something that was so specific to that game that Rack 2 couldn't effectively utilize, and
Yeah.
that's
Well,
like I think the interesting part about their NG Plus categories, like even though they're so short and like pretty much the similar length now, like the avenues that they've taken to get to that point have been so different because we've known about IMG for 15 years now, more than 15 years
pretty much
even.
since the game came out. There's like
Yeah,
forum posts from like 2007 or some shit talking
yeah,
about this weird glitch, right?
but but Quid Exploit took us multiple years after seeing things like the chickens in people's
Yeah.
weapons inventories, and then we got uh, Tweezle like having a consistent way of doing it that we didn't really understand, and it took
Yeah.
months after that before we sort of got like we got enough info to sort of think okay, that's exactly how it's being executed. It's by quitting the game and then things are happening related to the values on your save file, and then after that we were able to utilize that to its max potential in buying whatever we wanted out of the vendor and all of that. So
Yeah, which is the interesting other. It's like the duality of surrounding, because of course,
yeah,
like this, what we've been talking about mostly so far is I have an idea, let's implement it, and then you've got this other side, like with Quid Exploit, it's really a perfect case study where you've got
yes,
there's this thing happening sometimes which we have no understanding of. Maybe it's useless, but it'd be cool to find out. And then somebody or many somebodies do some strat hunting into it, and we figure out how it works slowly, often very, very slowly, figure out
yeah,
how it works, figure out exactly what you have to do to manipulate it, stuff like that. And then only once you have this understanding, going back to what we were talking about before, only once you have this understanding of what a thing actually is, can you think about how to use it. Because we had
correct.
this like random stuff with files just breaking, and as you said, vendors breaking. But if you told somebody, yeah, you're gonna be able to buy the Tira guys and just, Tira flip up to what's it called, laser defense facility, nobody would have believed you, right? But
Yeah,
of course,
you'd
that
be
is the
considered an
end.
absolute quack if you were to say that back in even 2017 or
Yeah,
2016. Like
exactly, exactly.
that just seems like nonsense.
Yeah.
But we were able to. I say we. I have to really thank like
The
people like
Ouya runners and strat hunters
yeah,
of the time.
yeah. I really have to thank people like Asaki and User who really like did a lot of the groundwork and like documentation of what Quid Exploit could really be. Um,
And I feel the need to clarify for people that don't entirely understand what that might look like. A lot of the time, it might be as simple to do, but as mind numbing as getting one more bolt and seeing if it changes anything. Okay, nothing changed. All right, document that, right? And having a
yeah,
massive spreadsheet of all these different bolt counts where everything else is the same. You might have the same game time, same weapons out, same point of the level, same planet, all this sort of stuff, right? And then you're
hmm,
changing like one variable. It's literally the same as just any form of scientific method being applied to
yeah,
speedrunning. That's really what it is. It's just a
yeah.
scientific method. And
And that's sort of like the two major branches I would say of like
yeah,
routing is that you have the practical sort of I'm in the game, I'm actively doing things as the character to try and progress it further in while breaking the game somehow, getting to a
exactly. Yeah.
certain place quicker. But things like this are more they're more like the second level of it, and it's more based in mechanics and the exploitation of like specific things that are unseen for the most part.
Yeah.
And
It's where you start delving deeper into like the reverse engineering of the game code, for example. Like with
yeah,
a great example is right now with Ratchet 2, we're looking at the race code to see if we can try and find a way to abuse the lap counts, right? To try and skip a
yeah,
lap, or if we could even just understand what creates the reverse lap glitch, right? Like
yeah.
that'd be fantastic. And that's like that third level, and there's like all these levels to it, and as you say, they sort of cascade down and progress and get admittedly more and more computer sciencey and more difficult to understand as you go
Yeah,
down.
you're really, and that's one of the barriers of entry that routing eventually sort of develops, is that it's easy for anyone, I think, to become a router, especially in
Yeah.
underdeveloped games or new games, because you just have to be the type of person that is curious and like wants to just see something and tinker with it and think about the game in like your head
Mm.
as a model,
Because you
I
can get that
suppose.
from just enjoying playing the game, right? Like you can
Yeah,
just go, oh, this is fun. Sure, I'm not getting anywhere, but I'm enjoying my time throwing Ratchet at this wall for an hour. Oh,
yeah,
I clipped through. Like it can
yeah,
be that simple sometimes. But as you say, once you get down to that level where you're starting to look at, race code and you're having to understand how the actual code itself works and you're having to understand loops and variables, that is not something everyone can do without learning how to do it, right? Like that is
hmm
why you've got these people creating. I mean, Rackman, the great Ratchet and Clank practice tool, right?
yeah,
Where would we be without Rackman? It's hard to even
yes,
think
precise.
about like, or the
It
Rack 2 practice tools either.
Yeah, both of those, like the Rack 2 practice tools, especially, I feel like you can attest to how much that helped you
Oh,
develop
for sure.
your skills. And this is this is something that also develops linearly with routing. Is the better the top players are at the game, the more possibilities there are. There are certain things that are just locked out in terms of routing at the start of a game's life cycle,
Yeah,
because
the players don't have high enough skill to execute it
yeah,
to find out.
and that is so important to realize. Like, you need to be good at the game. Like, you need to be properly good at the game at some point in the game's life cycle to be able to contribute to strat hunting, and that really sucks in some ways. But I feel like it's just sort of a necessary evil, because routing is so intertwined with running that you can't just be a sole router unless you're one of those people who is, looking through the code and like just has these computer science skills that will
Mm.
help you
Even
break the
then,
game
they
in that
tend to
way.
still be good players, which leads great
Correct.
into my.
Yeah.
Because the next question actually was, are the best speedrunners also routers and vice versa? So you've actually
Yeah.
gone and touched on it perfectly. Because I was going to comment, like, you get those people that are like solely strat hunters for the most part, but they're still generally good. Like, I look at Honeywell, right? Sure, he doesn't
yeah.
have an absolute top time, but what world record was just under 30 minutes. It was like 29 or something when he played,
Yeah.
right?
I,
And
I'll
he had a
see.
34, I think.
Yeah.
Like that's not top level, but he's still quite good at the game, right? Like he has spent probably hundreds of hours just learning to run the game and then finding stuff because he enjoyed doing it, right?
Yeah.
It's very rare that you get someone lower level at a game this late in a game's life cycle. I mean, we're 20 years into Ratchet and Clank, right? So it's
hmm
quite rare you get easy discoveries. It does happen. I like to
Yes,
think of the
I do have.
no-tack death abuse, for example.
Yes, that's one of them. The other one is Tiptoes.
Yes.
I love Tiptoes because the story behind it is someone just joined the server, posted the video, and was like, "Hey, do you know what this is? Like, do people know how to do this?" And it just blew people's minds
Yep.
because it's so conceptually similar to SIs, and people have accidentally done Tiptoes for ages, but
Yep.
they didn't put two and two together like this person did when it came
Mm.
to accidentally doing them and going, "Wait, is this something that can actually be utilized?" And that's the rare case of completely fresh eyes really revolutionizing the game, because
Yes.
sometimes top runners can be obtuse, they can be negative towards any sort of suggestion or discovery, or just even the idea of like going outside of what they understand as the route at the moment.
Yep.
And that is very, 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 very bad for the
And
game's
to
life cycle.
clarify for people, that's not even always like an ignorance thing. It's not even down to like, oh, you're a bad player, I'm ignoring you. It's more that if you take a top level player who is doing this high level strat hunting, yeah, like I'll call myself out for this one, right? You have done, for example, 10, 15, 20,000 attempts, and that route is like the back of your hand. You know it like the back of your hand. You have reasons for why you do everything. So when someone suddenly suggests what can be a quite out there suggestion which changes things, it's not even down to ignorance. It's more just like, whoa, I didn't think of that because my brain is just, yep, this is what we do. And there was no other thought, right?
Yeah.
And as I said with that no tack thing, in hindsight, it's pretty obvious. The fish can kill you and you can just ignore the continue point, go straight back to ship. But that requires a couple of good ideas from new eyes, right? Because nobody had thought to do that first step of skipping the continue point, right? Which is so interesting to me. And that is where I actually think if you are a newer player to a game looking to be helpful towards a route, I think the best thing you can do is look at it as a whole, understand how the game progresses, right? Like you need to understand if the game's linear, like objective A, objective B, that sort of stuff. But once you understand the objective system of the game, what you can go through and do is you can just look at the route, even at the world record, don't be afraid to criticize, and just say, hey, why don't we do this instead? You know, why don't we try and do there? And a lot of the time, to be honest, it will have already been considered and there will be a very good answer for it. But every now and then, you're going to have that golden apple idea where, oh, we hadn't thought of that. That's a really good idea, you know? And that, I think, is the best way to also gain an understanding of the game. Because even if you're wrong and somebody tells you why you're wrong, you've learned something, right? So there's no downside to that.
Like, don't be afraid of asking questions. Some people can be really snarky about it, and you just have to ignore those people. Like,
unfortunately, people are people, especially on the internet. But
and like speedrunners are the worst of it. Like,
yeah, for sure.
A lot of not to dog my friends and all that, but
we're all guilty of it.
But yeah, like
I said, usually not ignorance for a reason. Usually being the key word.
Yeah, like there's always good reasons towards some things that might seem extremely obvious to like a normal person. And sometimes it's just things like crash prevention that you wouldn't know as a new runner. Like there's so many hidden factors that just you would not know as base knowledge because it isn't seen in the run. Sometimes the most unseen elements of the run are the things that are stringing it together. They're stringing together every part of the routing. And like, again, that's something you learn with time. That's why you need to be a good runner to truly route. But I think it is always good when you have the fresh eyes, when you have like a quote unquote naive perspective of the game, you need to harness it. You need to keep those eyes, especially when you're getting good at the game. You need to learn properly how to play it, but you need to keep those eyes and always look at the game through them, because that's the key to finding, your base level routing discoveries.
Yeah. Like just not accepting things as they are. Like I think that's the
correct.
As you say, the worst thing you can do is to just you look at the route and you learn it and you take it as it is and you improve at it and then you don't try and change it. Like I think to improve as a player, I tell people in practice, if you're struggling with a trick, try and find a different way to do that section, right? That's base experimenting skills, and that has, in many, many, many cases, led to new strategies being found, right? And so, as you say, it's the new eyes. I am going to lead us into the next question, actually, because it's, again, related to route. I as we know, we've both talked a lot about how we love the routes in speedrunning, so I sort of focus on them a bit. I'll just say it how I've worded it, does a new route invalidate a previous world record? I will let you respond to that.
Oh, that is one of the toughest questions. That is something that I have always considered. In the most objective way possible, yes. Because the fastest time is the fastest time. You just have to consider this. You just have to consider that.
Like, that is what speedrunning is.
Yes. So you cannot get mad if a faster route beats something that you worked so hard for, you grinded for 6 months for. You just have to let that go. If you understand that, you are golden. You will be so much happier than a ton of people, because God knows like how many people I've seen get so worked up about their efforts getting wasted, but like don't think of it that way. You just have to think of speedrunning as like striving towards the fastest possible time. But to actually think about it in terms of like what routing means to a particular category, I think it's it's fine for people to have attachments to previous routes and routes they started running with and like quote unquote grew up with as a runner, because you find a lot of sentimentality in how it was done then, like how you were learning the game at that point and using the skills that you developed and how you got better than the people above you. Like you keep those things close to your heart, especially as someone who is a router like me. Like I hate not being at the forefront of routing in my games anymore because I don't have the particular skills anymore. And like it hurts because I was someone who was that person who used routing to my advantage. I was someone who beat times constantly, the people above me, because I was able to find discoveries and find quicker ways of doing things because I just had that time in my hands and I had that curiosity. But I can't be mad when people like Yugi beat my times because they discovered new things or they really worked at, um, you know, optimizing the things that I hadn't worked on as much as a runner. So I think like when judging runners, you do have to consider like how good their time was with that particular route, and sometimes that can be a fairer assessment of like the actual skill level of first, second, and third place or whatever than just purely the fastest time. But at the end of the day, it is a game of world records. If you don't have world record, then like that's constantly what you're striving for. That's just my view, I guess.
Yeah, because that is when you're looking at something which has a leaderboard, it has a first place, you're obviously, if you're not first place, you're striving for first place,
Yeah.
right? Just even if you're not actively actually wanting it, that is the ultimate goal. Yeah, and
Yes.
even once you get first place, you're still striving for that future first place, that untouchable first place.
Yeah.
And I think you touched on a lot of great things there. Specifically, I like how you clarified that you want to look at the route when you look at, for example, the 3 top runs, because you might have X run that is done in 2 minutes and 20 seconds, and then a 5-second discovery is found, right? 5-second
Yeah.
time save, and somebody does it in 2 minutes and 19 seconds. Now, in theory, they played 4 seconds worse than the previous record, but that's still world record.
Yeah.
And it's so hard because, as you say, it when you've got a leaderboard and everyone's aiming for first place, the top run is the top run and nothing can change that. But it does
Correct.
lead to often these bitter feelings. I'm not going to name any names. I don't want to like bring up anything, right? But there have been many cases in not just the Ratchet community. I can think of every
Oh
single
yeah,
spearrunning
I was
community.
not even thinking of the rat community when
Yeah,
I was
exactly.
thinking about that. If anything, I feel like a lot of people in the rat community are pretty self-aware of um like what it means to have world record and like how routes are just, they're just something you can't avoid. Route changes, they happen. You just got to live with it.
I mean, in the Ratchet community, it's become a running joke that in the OG3, we'll always get a crazy record. You know, whether it's me in NG
Yeah.
Plus or Franz in Rack 1 or
Zem and No QE
Zem in
was
No QE
the
was fucking
that was a
hilarious.
running joke for like 7 years, pretty much. Zem would get
Yeah.
something like, "That's the run. That's the 30-second break.
And it
That's the
would
minute
be
break."
a god run.
Yeah, and then 2 weeks later, the punchline is, "Hey, I found this." Like when he got the first
Ugh.
27, punchline was mission 3 skip, free fall skip within 2 weeks of that run, and Zem was tapped out. He just
Yeah.
had
And
having
like,
none of that.
while we say for the most part we're pretty good at dealing with that, we're just going, okay, moving on, next record with it, right? It does at some point have an effect, right? Because I
Yeah.
think what people who haven't been in a situation like that don't understand. Like even if you're not at the top level, you might have felt something like this, where you get this PB and then this new, for example, nuke storage skip is found, and it suddenly gets so much easier to get that time, right?
Mm.
And it happens a lot, but I think at the top level it's extra pronounced because just the level of commitment and the level of hard work you put in. Like Zem to get the 27, right? He was putting in 6 to 8 hours a day on Ouya for about 6 months, right? With
Yeah.
very little skips, right? That is a
Yeah.
full-time commitment. Of course, being a streamer and whatever, you can afford to do that. But a lot of the case in speedrunning, it's people have had a break from work or something and they've committed their entire break to something like it. Or they're a
Yeah.
kid on holiday from school and they commit their entire holiday. So essentially, it is these people giving up their time and their passion into something, and then they finally do it, and it's this massive sense of relief. It's like getting past your final exams in school, and then 2 weeks later it's like, jokes, there's actually this new exam that we decided you have to sit, right?
Yeah.
It's like just being dumped on you, because again it leads into the next topic that I talk about, the responsibility or obligation to a category. Because once you're at that top level, most people feel this sense of obligation to the category because they love it. They've played it for so long because they love it. And now they don't just want to get the top time because it is the top time or because it's a god run, but because the actual run itself is aspiring to watch, and to watch it done cleanly. Like, in my opinion, what I aspire to is a run which from start to finish is done very cleanly and is therefore enjoyable to watch. And I feel that if I half-ass a record, even if, for example, I get 40 seconds of time save, if I only PB by 10 seconds, I know in my head that there's like 30, 40 seconds of mistakes in that run,
Yeah.
then, right? And I know that that is not pleasant to watch to my eyes. And if it's not pleasant to my eyes, then someone who doesn't really care about Ratchet's not going to care either, right? So there's this
Yeah.
obligation to the category that I think is really hard to shake. And I mean, we've talked about this countlessly. I've talked about it on stream for years, that it's taken me years to just say, basically, what the healthy thing to do is to just say, fuck it, I'll play this game when I want to, right? Because there are
Yeah.
so many examples of speedrunners who just played and played and played, and they got this time, and then a new strat was found, so they kept playing, and it just happens in this loop. I mean, you saw it happen to Zem. Usually, the new strat came out, okay, he won't play for a month or two, but he'll come back, and he's still relatively burnt out, but keeps going, right? Because he was so obligated.
Yeah.
But
And
eventually, it just culminates where you just can't keep
yeah,
going, and so he
it's
stops
a
for 2
huge
years.
compounding effect
Exactly.
when
Yeah.
you're someone, especially someone like Zem, who I really, one thing I've always respected about Zem is that he is like so fiercely competitive when he has a goal to focus himself on, like, and that is why he has done 11 minute barrier breaks in
Yeah. Which, when you put
Uyu
it
no
that way,
Kili
is
at a row.
ridiculous.
Yeah, like when he has a goal, when he knows another time is possible that he can feel comfortable in, he will go for it and he
Yep.
will succeed in it because he is someone who will push himself to do that.
Mm.
But doing that over and over and over when it only gets harder with each minute, that
Yep.
is the tipping point.
Because the games
It's
don't
like,
get easier, right?
yes, yeah, no game gets easier, I think.
People
In
think
all,
like, oh, strat found was easy, right? Game category gets easier. And I'm like, okay, and what that means is the standards for the run have gone up.
yep,
Suddenly you need to
pinpoint
play
right
this
there.
much
Yeah.
better. So yeah, games don't get easier as you, they only get harder. Sorry, I kind of interrupted you there. Keep going. Sorry.
Oh no, it's all good. Like from my experience, like my thing was tools of destruction. Like I started out with it. I was on top of the game for years, and after nearly 5 years of constantly having the obligation and feeling in my mind that I had to be at the top, I had to be the best in it. Like it really just wore me down, and I hated actually running it and playing it. Like I would only do the bare minimum that I knew I could get record in, and that's something that felt so just worthless in the end because I
Mm,
wasn't actually pushing myself to get something that was remarkable and would stand the test of time, especially when I was seeing times from people like Lexos who would come along and they'd have way better subs than me because they had actually grinded and played more and really dedicated themselves to it. It was just that I had like a higher consistent level of gameplay at that point that I coasted on for so long. And I was unable to eventually convince myself to keep rising my level of gameplay because I was just
Mm.
finding it so miserable. And I feel like if you really love a game, you need to find a way to avoid that trap. You need to take
Yeah.
breaks because I see runners, a lot of new runners nowadays that will focus on a single category and they assume that they will feel the exact same way about it in 5 years.
Spoiler
Or
alert, you will not.
you you won't. And even if the route stays the exact same and it's all like everything that you love about it, you are going to find walls that will pop up eventually, whether
Mm.
that's mental or actually in the gameplay that frustrate you so much that you can't play it. And I'm not saying that games get worse as speedruns. I'm saying that you only have so much dedication inside of you
Mm.
when it comes to a certain thing or just repetitive motion doing it over and over and over in speedrunning. I mean,
There's
there are people out there who probably do have the mental fortitude to do it, but I feel like they're way fewer and far between than you think.
Well, that's why they're such rarities, right? Like, I can think of
Yeah.
examples. Deo Man, right? He's been playing fucking Spyro 1, 120% consistently for, what, 9 years?
Yeah, like nearly a
Um,
decade.
yeah, like, and that is a level of passion. That is not obligation, right? Most people, within a couple of years of playing a category, they'll get really good, but they'll get a sense of obligation or a sense that I need to get this time. And at some point, it stops being a hobby. I mean, people, I forget who tweeted it. There was this tweet that like blew up a couple of years ago, and it was like, speedrunning is the most toxic thing you can do to your mental. Something along those lines. And to an extent, it's true because I think it's such a self-gratifying act that inherently pushes you towards a mindset of just dedication, dedication, dedication. And it's great skills to have. Don't get me wrong. They've genuinely helped
Yes.
me in my life. But they can also be your downfall because you can go, okay, I'm going to make time for this every single day, no matter what. And I don't feel like playing today. That's fine. I've got to get my 4 hours of attempts in. Like, and it becomes this thing. Everybody's heard that speedrunner or those speedrunners that are just not enjoying it anymore.
Yeah, just miserable all the time. And like,
Yeah.
I get that that's the way you achieve like the absolute best of the best times in theory, but like you have to take a step back and realize speedrunning is not something that's supposed to be all encompassing of you
It's
as
not
a
a
human
job for
being.
99% of us.
Yeah, like if you're making money off it and that is like your actual streaming job and all that, then that's something that's different to this. I should clarify. Like
Yeah.
if you have to stream and you have to, make money through subs and ads and donations and all that, like that's something different. Like that's something you have to willingly sort of sacrifice about
Yeah.
yourself, I
That
guess.
becomes
But
more than speedrunning. That becomes career and job discussions, right?
yeah, and even then, like that's when you just apply, things that people do in their actual jobs when it comes to like quote unquote work life balance and all that.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
like you can find healthy measures in
Mm.
terms of having a job. Sorry, having speed running or streaming as a job, I should say. But for people who they work, they have a family and obligations outside of speed running, and they're sacrificing some of that or
Mm.
sacrificing too much of that to speed run. It's like you need to take a step back. I get
It's
that
a
this is
disappointingly common thing.
yeah,
And I don't
and that's
mean to
sort
say disappointing in terms of, oh, people that do it should be ashamed of themselves. I'm guilty of it, right?
yeah, and
Like,
same like
we all are. But, like, I don't think you'll find a speedrunner at a high level who will say they don't have regrets.
yeah,
Like, my regrets would be, like, I can pretty happily talking about this. I definitely sacrificed a bit of social life during the midst of some of my bigger no IMG grinds because I was like, well, if I do that, then I won't get my X amount of rack 2 in today, and then my
yeah,
level will drop, or rather, not continue to excel. And that is the trap that I think people need to learn to avoid, and that is the trap that I have learned to avoid recently, like the past couple of years, right?
yeah,
I mean, that's why I've gone like really hard for like a month, but I've made sure it's like when I have time. I refuse now, I'll put it like this. I refuse to create time for speedrunning, even though I still have a passion for it. In fact, I could catch myself playing some NoIMG this very second. I very
Yep.
much feel like it, but I refuse to create time for it. I will always find time for it, right?
Yep.
And that's
That's
why
that's
I also have been taking breaks, right? People have been asking me where I've been, and I'm like, man, I'm a working man now, right? Like, I'm on the tennis court 40, 50 hours a week. Like, I don't come home and have the energy to compete at the highest level because, look, people like to diss on speedrunning. When you're doing speedrunning at the highest level, it is a mental battle. It is very taxing. It is very difficult, right? And
yep.
that is a whole other can of worms of just, again, this self-encapsulating just trap because you are doing it for yourself. People like to say you got help with the community, which to an extent is true, for example, if you're streaming it, but inherently, you've still got to battle with your mind. It is
Yep.
still a push against the game and just you. And again, most runners at a high level have probably sacrificed, to put it really nicely,
Yeah.
social life and family gatherings and shit like that. That is
Yeah.
common, and it's a problem that I think needs addressing.
It's weird to talk about this because it's
Yeah.
like, in saying all this, neither of us are disparaging speedrunning like as a
Oh,
hobby.
no, I fucking love speedrunning. It's awesome.
But it but yeah, it's like you do encounter the people who just they take too much on themselves to get a
Yes.
particular time, and there is so much sunk cost fallacy in
Fallacy.
terms of just like,
I've been doing this for 6 months. If I stop now,
yeah,
I might be a week away.
yeah, and everyone thinks they're a day away. I'll get this today, I'll get this next
Yeah.
week, and all that. And like,
The amount of times you
sometimes
see
you're
world
right.
record today title, and it's funny when it works, but it's not common.
Yeah, like what Liquid was doing. Simpsons didn't run all story missions for 118, and he had world record today, and he's like stream mode for 3 weeks straight, and he eventually
Yep.
got it. But like,
But that was
he
3 weeks of it.
yeah, like it's
Yeah.
just sort of a running joke thing. Like you always think today's going to be the day.
Yeah. Because you
Sometimes,
always feel like you're playing well for the
yeah,
first minute. The first minute of the stream when
for
you
the
make the
first
title.
minute.
Yeah. No,
But
it's interesting. I'm going to say something potentially a little controversial, but I actually think it's a fallacy in general that people say, oh, I'm playing every day, I am improving every day, and the fact that I am doing attempts every day means that I will get the record quicker. I have
yeah,
come to think that that is completely
it
wrong.
it is wrong.
Um,
I agree with that. I say this in personal experience because I'm someone who like sort of notoriously does not do a lot of runs. I am
you
someone
spend a
who,
lot of time practicing and playing
yes,
instead.
I just play the game, or I'm routing, or I'm thinking about it. I'm just like mentally rehearsing, like in my free time, how to do the game. But I'm not actually someone who plays every day or played every day to do runs. I only did that when I felt entirely confident in
Yeah,
my state
ability.
as a person to
Because what's the
do
point? If
the,
you're not confident in X
yeah,
trick, why would I do a run to fail X trick
yeah,
X number of times?
precisely.
Like
Like,
my
why
my
not play
best
as your peak
analogy
self?
for it. Exactly. No, my best analogy for it is now that I'm saying this again openly, but I am training to be a low level tour player, as like a tennis low level tour player. And one of the biggest things, it's like, even though I'm training every day, there's a big difference between, say, practice and the fatigue that comes with a match, right? If I was
Yeah,
playing matches every single day, I'm not going to perform at my best. And that is what people are doing with speedrunning. And they're doing it much worse because they're doing, some people are doing like 8 hours of fucking attempts a day, right?
yeah,
And the mental and even the physical fatigue that comes with that is simply not sustainable. And people are convincing themselves that, hey, I'm doing 6 to 8 hours of attempts a day, I'm getting better. And I just don't agree because your body needs rest times, even though it's, gaming or whatever. And the thing people do is, oh, I'm gaming all day, I'm improving. Like that's the gag, that's the community. It's
yeah,
just not true. And it's become such a big thing in speedrunning to be like, okay, I'm doing 8 hours a day. My best grinds have been when I've woken up and gone, I don't really feel like playing today. All right, I'm just gonna not. Or maybe I'll get in 30 minutes of practice and all right, I'm done, sort of thing, right?
Yeah.
And somehow doing that and playing only like 2 hours a day tops within 3 days, I've lowered the record like 40 seconds and got what people are calling a god run. And I'm just like, I did this without playing 6 hours a day, not because like, oh, look at me, I'm crazy, I can do it in only 2 hours. It's no, I think it's actually because it's a better way of doing it, right?
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree. And this absolutely perfect case study is your 20 grind, I think. And
Yep.
the records you got before that is that
I
you were
did that in
just,
what, 12 days?
yeah, like 2 weeks, you went from, okay, I'm back, I'm doing things, and you just got record after record after record. And then it's just sort of, it sort of fell into your lap, sort of. Like
Yeah.
there was just such a natural progression to it because you didn't force any step of the process. You
Yep.
practiced exactly what you think needed to be practiced. You got accustomed to new tricks and the new implementations of the run. And then you just let your confidence in your skill from
Mm.
the gameplay you had beforehand just let it ride to
And
getting
I mean,
your
the
goal time.
joke at the start of every stream at that point was, "Oh, how long did you practice today, Fear?" And I was like, "Oh, 5 minutes."
Yeah.
It was like, I've done my 120 hours of mid-air charge practice. I don't miss them. Why would I spend more time on it? Let's do some runs.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds kind of crazy, but again, you reach a point where you're I'm gonna put it bluntly, you're good at the game eventually. Like,
Yeah.
um, you
Some
don't
people
get like,
definitely over practice and over
oh, for
attempt
sure.
whatever they're
You
doing.
can get worse by practicing. I think people forget this. If you spend an hour straight practicing something you can already do, I guarantee you're going to get worse. For the simple fact that if you're doing something for an hour straight and you're actually practicing properly and thinking about it, it doesn't become just repetitions. It becomes, oh, how can I do this a bit better? And you're going to naturally try and change some things because, well, you're practicing for a speed run. That's the point, right? So you're going to change things and you're going to get worse at it. Like, I always say this, like, people ask me how much do I practice clank clips when I'm grinding. When we first found clank clips, I practiced them 2 hours a day for 4 days, and I barely practiced them since. Like,
Yeah.
I'd maybe check, I'd do like a clank clip before I do runs, and I'm like, cool, I can still do it easy and move on.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna
You
again
have to
say
build
it
that habit.
bluntly. Yeah, exactly. I built it. I did the work at the start, but then I don't ruin that, right? Because you can
Yeah.
ruin the work. And I'm gonna again put it bluntly, I've got the best consistency with clank clips in the community. I do, right? And I think people hurt themselves because they actually go in and practice too much. And I think it's the same in every game, every sport, everything. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
kind of a shame, but I think that's a pretty good summary of that whole
Yeah.
controversial take that I shared. I mean, have you
Yeah.
got any more to add to
Ooh,
that?
real hot take. Ooh, spicy.
Yeah.
Rack alert.
Rack
We haven't.
alert! Fear's not a
I don't
DJ!
have. I don't have nitro. I can't post a rack alert in our DMs. Um. Yeah. No. I agree a lot with what you're saying there. Like, it is the most optimal way to speedrun. Like, you really have to take things over your whole career as a runner of a particular game, and you have to apply them, like,
Mm.
or just like get to the competence level and the consistency that you feel comfortable with as a runner, and then you just need to keep working on that, keeping it at that level,
Mm.
like with whatever practice you think keeps you at that. Like, I definitely suffer from over considering like how I do things and forgetting how I like was doing things in the flow of a particular run. Like uh, Quest for Booty, the second future Ratchet and Clank future game, like there's extremely difficult clips or a specific extremely difficult clip that I would always overthink, and just whenever I was practicing, I would always adjust things and like try and get myself so optimal and precise with it. And it took quite a long time for me to realize what you were saying is that I was actively hurting myself by just not sticking to something that worked
Yep.
and just let it sit and simmer in my mind as the way I do things. Because
Yep.
and when you're in a run, you're stressing out. When you're on pace, you don't have time to think. You only have time to execute.
Mm.
And
And
you
if you're
need to,
doubting yourself going into that, it's going to be awful.
yep, never doubt yourself.
Yep.
This is my biggest tip. You have to always expect things work. You
Mm.
need to never think about failure. You need to just think it's going to be so good when I get this trick.
Yep.
And you just need to keep yourself hype and positive. Like, it sounds so fake, but I assure you, this is what has helped me the most
Oh, for sure.
in terms of like completing runs as consistently as I did at a high level, is that I went into every single run that was on a decent pace thinking I can do this, I will close it out, because I just knew in my head I was able to execute at the level that was necessary for it. Because I don't think about, oh, I can lose time here. I just think, okay, I got that before, I can do it again, or I can do it better. I know how my goal has 5 seconds here. I know where that 5 seconds was lost. I can just do that. Like,
Mm.
I had so thoroughly drilled that in my head through practice and just my mentality that it became the biggest boon that I had as a runner.
People need to understand the difference between confidence, like thinking, oh yeah, I can get this, I can get this, and I'm going to get this.
Yep.
It's again, it sounds like, oh, listen to me, I'm a motivational speaker. But when I put that into my practice, like when I extended that mindset beyond runs into my practice, I improved so much. One, I had a person ask recently, I'm not gonna out them, but they asked me what I changed, because they said I basically publicly said I'd changed my practice a bit and how I was doing things, going from, I think it was a 22 to the 21 grind, because I got so much
Yeah.
better after 22, like, which is
Yeah.
so funny
Yeah.
to say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, like I'm a much better speedrunner now than I was then, which is so strange. But basically, what I told this person is when I went into my practice, because obviously I already had that mindset in runs, right? But then I just went, okay, what if I apply this to practice as well? And I said, well, I'm just going to practice this until I do it 10 times in a row. Now, that's a thing you hear a lot of people say, like, hey, I'm going to practice this and I'm going to get it 10 times in a row. But then the amount of people I see get it 9 times in a row fuck up that 10th and just go, oh, fuck it, good enough, right? Like, no.
Yeah.
You said 10 times in a row, get it 10 times in a row, stop slacking off. Because if you miss that 10th time and you go into a run, your brain is saying, oh, but I did miss it that one time,
Yeah.
right?
It
Like,
every time in the run is always that 10th time. That is
exactly.
always the 10th time, because when you're
Exactly.
doing that practice, you're always thinking like, oh, okay, I need to get this one so I'm done with practice. Like,
Yep.
that is such a weak mentality,
Yeah, and I
because
said, I always said with this, I'm like, you don't move on until you got that, because in a run, you have one chance.
yeah.
If you don't trust yourself to get it every single time, you don't move on. And that's why when I first started implementing double charges, I do practice on stream. People would come in, they're like, you've been doing this for an hour and a half. What the hell? And I'm like, well, I haven't got my 10 times in a row yet. And now at the time, people were like, you're crazy. You're not getting mid-air charges 10 times in a row. But now I sit down and I shit out 10 times in a row in practice like it's nothing, right?
Yeah.
Because I've gotten to that level. And that's like the mindset that I took to it. And what I can say is this person recently reached out to me. They messaged me and they said, it had only been about 2 weeks. They lowered their PB by about a minute and a half in that time. And they reached out to me and they said, I feel like my speedrunning has completely changed from changing this. And it sounds so simple, but just basically actually being harsh on yourself, not in like a rude way, but if I say I'm getting it 10 times, I'm getting it 10 times. If you go to the gym and you say, I'm going to do, I don't know, 10 100 kilo squats or something, you don't get 9 through and say, oh, I'm puffed. You do the 10th squat,
Yes.
right? And it's the same in practice. And I hate it when people don't do that.
Yeah. So slacking off and being complacent when it comes to your practice is always it's always a big pet peeve of mine. More so when people just assume that runs are equivalent to practice
Oh,
as
they're
well.
not.
Like,
It pisses me
it,
off.
that's it's just not
Otherwise,
how
you'd
it
have
works.
professional athletes only doing competitions.
Yeah.
And
Like, and
again, that doesn't
that's
work.
outrageous. That just
It's
isn't a thing.
stupid.
Like, when you're a basketball player, like, you do drills of just hundreds of free throws or hundreds and hundreds of whatever shot you're doing, so you can get it down absolutely perfect when you need to execute it. Because, like, it's so important to just have like an unwavering sense of confidence in yourself. And you see that whenever you see interviews of like the tops, the goats, or whoever in
Mm.
their sports, like,
They
you
often
see how
sound very arrogant.
yes, but it's not arrogance.
It's confidence. It's different.
It's just confidence.
Yeah.
And yeah, like some people can be dickish aside from that, but like you can't have moments of doubting when you're someone who wants to be the best. And pretty
Mm.
much everyone that is competing in speedrunning at a particular level wants to be the best.
Yep.
And they need to believe that. Like
Because if you don't, you're not gonna do it. Again, it sounds so motivational speaker. I remember this one interview with Kobe Bryant. It was after a match, and they asked him. It's like, that shot had to be made. You had what 4 seconds on the clock, and your entire team and your coach were shouting for you to pass because of the position you're in. Why didn't you pass it? Right? And he's like, because I trusted myself to make that shot. My teammates could have missed, but I make that shot every time.
yeah.
And I'm just like that was mind blowing to me when I heard it. Because again, a lot of people call that arrogance, but to me, that's just trust in yourself. Like,
Yeah.
he knew he could make that shot. And if he's got that mindset taking the shot, even if he misses, that's probably like some outside factor. But if he goes into it thinking, oh, this is a low probability shot, it's not going to go in the basket. Like, bro, it's the
Yeah.
same with speedrunning. And I think that people, for some reason, it's become really mythologized how the top runners do things in speedrunning because we've had this history of like, Mario runners and Nintendo runners and
Yeah.
all
No,
this that
that's
do
one of
these
the
streams.
downsides I think of like the great man sort of way content creation has sort of gone in terms of
And then he
video.
grinded 8 hours.
Yeah, like it sort of just seems like this process of inevitability. Like this person, they came to the community, they were good, and they were just good. They whoever's talking about the video will talk about their particular grind and what they did, but never really linger on the specific element of whatever their mentality was that got them to that point, or just even what they did to excel above the same runners that were entering at the same point. Because you can see in communities when you'll get a runner that'll come in, they'll do a run or two, and then they just sort of leave and be like, okay, this isn't for me, or I can't do this, or whatever, and that's fine.
Which we're not criticizing, by the way.
Yeah,
It's a
it's not a
hobby.
criticism. I should mention I'm talking about people who want to be the absolute best. Um, I just my train of thought. Hold on.
I think with what you were saying, a great example of this is Emerald. I am going to name drop for the
Yeah,
first time.
yeah.
Because he came in, he did some good runs. Because of the timing of his runs, he didn't get Rook of the Year, did he? Because he started in like
No.
2015, not 15, 20, like 18 or something, technically.
Yeah.
And
It's
then like
just a
started to pick up
technicality
steam.
thing.
Yeah, but he would have and could have. Oh, granted, that was a strong year. Shouldn't say would have,
He
could
was
have.
quite it was quite an improved runner. Like
Yeah.
you can look at the list of runners in the past 2 years. You would probably put Emerald pretty close to the top of people.
Well,
Who have
because he's
become
gone in
stars.
2 years from rookie to Rack 2 world record holder. And he is
Yeah.
the perfect example of someone who's just passionate. He's played pretty much every day and he's just gone, hey, I like this version of the game. I'm going to keep playing it. Oh, this version's optimal. Cool. I'm going to keep playing it. Doesn't change my opinion. Get better at it. Oh, cool. Keep pushing it, right? And
Yeah.
he has excelled. And I would say that a good part of his success, in my completely uninformed opinion, is due to the fact that he doesn't ever force it. Like just the other day, he did like a 20-minute stream and was just like, this game is pissing me off today. I'm not playing. Came back the next day, wasn't turned off by it, played and got like PB or something. Like that's
Yeah.
just the way
He
he
was on world
plays. And it's
record
so
pace in the end
healthy.
game. Like
Yeah, exactly. Like he had a
he's someone who's
crazy
so
run.
yeah, he's so unfazed.
Yeah.
He for someone who is like a newer like runner who is younger than us, like he's already developed so many of these good skills when it comes to
Yep.
just understanding when it's time to stop, when it's time to keep pushing, and just have this perseverance to know like, yeah, I can do this. Like you can
Mm.
have moments of self-doubt and that's fine, but it's like he's someone that I've really respected for his mentality of he knows that the time is possible. He knows that if he keeps playing, he will get to that level and excel and achieve it. Like
Yep.
he's someone I think has like a really logical approach to it in that way.
Yeah. He understands the linearity of, okay, this person, well, not anymore because he's basically the best of the game, but in the past it'd be like, well, this person's a few spots above me. I have to work to get there. I'll put in the work. It's simple,
Yeah.
right? It's like goal, how to get there, and he does the work, right?
Yeah.
It's like a J. Cole quote. Oh, putting out all the quotes today.
Oh my
And he's
God.
like, he was talking about JID. And he's just like, he didn't just want to get the goal. He actually wants to do the work to get there. And I think that's a great quote because that is the difference between not just, the best speedrunners, but just in general, people that succeed and don't, or get to the highest level. Because, I mean, look at Emerald. If he saw something he was bad at, I remember so often he would just ask the Discord. He'd like ping me or ping Scotto or ping Manto and just be like, how do I do this better?
Yeah.
Right? And he would sit there and he would practice and he'd get better at it. Next stream you'd see he'd be better at it.
Yeah.
Like is there not a more perfect mentality? Like I have
yeah,
so
it's
much
so
respect
logical.
for Ralph.
Like,
Yeah,
and a lot of people
exactly.
seem to miss that. And it's like you in some ways you can think, well, it's obvious. You would just ask people, you would just study runs and all that. But sometimes you just need to be proactive about it and be unashamed. Be like, I want to improve. I need to get every advantage I can in terms
Yep.
of improving. Like a lot of people have too much pride to
Yeah.
improve. They'll deliberately not do a particular strat, or they will not change the
Historically, it
way.
was always ship levels for Ratchet 2, for example. No one
Yep.
practiced them.
Yep.
Like
People who
in NG Plus, you had just me and Scotto who can do Gorn well, and not a single other person is close.
yeah, yeah. No, that's really the big thing. People would rather choose to lose time on things that they could practice and get better at
Yep.
because they just didn't want to do it. They didn't like it. And that's
Yep.
like, you realize that the speed run is the whole run. It's not just the parts you like. That's an
Follow
unfortunate
race.
reality. Yes. Well, that's something where I come in,
All I
where I
need to
was
say.
like, that's where I've pushed fear in rack 2.
Yep.
Like, and
Credit to mobius.
I've pushed him to be, you're over a half second better at race now than you were, because
there was a small period of time I was as good at the race as you, and you're the best player at the race. I'm not as good anymore, and you've excelled a bit. So, but point is, I actually put the work in. I remember exactly the conversation you originally put it to me, because I used to be on that team of most Ratchet 2 runners. I'm throwing some shade at all Rack 2 runners right now, and they're just like, why would I practice the race? It's only like 2 seconds a time save, and it's really boring. And I'm like, on the contrary, you can spend 20 minutes learning the race once, and you will never need to practice it again, and you save 2 seconds for the rest of your speedrunning career.
Yeah. People would rather spend that 20 minutes saving 0.1 on a piece of movement that they already know how to do because they enjoy that more. And it's like,
or gain 2% more consistency on X trick.
Yeah, and it's like, yeah, speedrunning is about enjoyment. But if you're someone who wants to be the top of a game, you need to make that sacrifice.
Yeah, exactly.
And sometimes most of the time, once you get to it, you realize that a lot of things have a fun process to them. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Like the race is fun to me to figure out and
I
get
used
better
to
at.
like trash on the race in streams, and then I learned how to actually do it. And now every time I get there, chat's always like Z race, and I'm like, I like the race. What do you mean? Because I actually learned how to do it. So often, if you just learn how to do things, it's not so bad. Like, the unfair feeling of it or the boringness to it can be because you don't know what you're doing, right? Because people are like, on the race, you're not doing anything. It's like, no, you're not doing anything. The good players are.
Yeah,
and that
you
it
have
really
to find
is that
joy
simple.
in like everything about a run. Like that's something that I've always held close to me as well, is that the reason I felt like I got so good is because I enjoyed playing the game. When I didn't enjoy playing Todd anymore, that is exactly when I started compromising and getting bad. Like you can pinpoint it right there. When I hated playing it, that is when I hated being a runner of it, and I was worse as a runner.
Which
Things
goes
that I
back
still
to that
enjoy.
obligation topic.
Yeah, exactly. Like what things that I still enjoy, like Deadlocked and all that, I'm as good or if not better than I was, a year ago at it, because it's just something that, despite not speedrunning as much anymore, I still harbor so much love for it when I, do pick up the game. And that's what keeps me at such a high level, I think, is I still hold so much in my heart for the things that I still feel passionate about. Like that, again, that's obvious to say, but a lot of people will just hold on to little scraps of something they enjoy about a game and keep running it until even those disappear, and you're just like,
Yep.
oh, I find everything miserable. No, you need to stop before that happens.
Yeah. And it's really sad. Like, I'm gonna. Actually, I won't name an example. I was
Yeah,
going
don't
to, but I don't think
probably
I
shouldn't
will.
name drop for this, but
Probably shouldn't. But like, there are so many examples that you can find of people that still love games, but cannot bring themselves to play them because they associate the game now with this time where they pushed and pushed and pushed for really no reason. Like, sure, they were getting a better time, but they were not enjoying it. And they should have just stopped, man. Like, I know that people are like, oh, but if I do the work now, I'll be remembered or I'll have a legacy or something. And I'm just like, man, come back later and be that guy that came back and still shit on the record. Except that way, you don't hate the game. Like, there are so many people that still love the game and say word for word, "Oh yeah, I love that game. I'm not going to play it ever again, but I love that game."
yeah,
It's like, well, do you? You burnt yourself out on it, right? I caught myself being really close to it with Rack 2. There was that grind when I think it was midway through the 22 grind where I
mm,
just stopped at one point for like a month because I was like, I am teetering on that edge of damaging my enjoyment of this game for the rest of my life
yeah,
because I was just like so angry at how things were going. There was like this day where I did, I think, 10 hours of attempts and I clocked like 9 paces into the last 2 minutes that all died or something along
yeah,
those lines. And it pissed me off so much. And I was like, I am playing this well that if I kept playing for a week or two, I would probably get the record. And I would also probably never play this category again. And so I just stopped for like a month. And that was the first time I'd ever let myself step away from a grind because I was just like, I still love this game and I know that I'm going to get more out of it. And now, for the record, I'm glad I did that because every time I go back to the game, I keep on having breaks and then having periods of activity and then breaks again, right? But every time I play it, it's like that first world record grind again, man. Like, I
yeah,
genuinely love the experience every time I'm grinding no IMG right now. And I think in that 22 grind, I was really close to truly ending the story there. And we never would have seen 21 because I wouldn't have been pushing or finding those strats. Never would have pushed for 20, which, who knows, probably would have led to less activity on PS3 because some of those people have told me they were loving playing it because they saw me playing it,
hmm
right? Which means PS2 would still be considered faster, and like, it could have been this big butterfly effect. And now it also could be unfair to give myself that much credit, but it's like, that's my point. Like, I think there's also a point of obligation where if you love the game and you truly want what's best for you and the game, the best thing is for you to keep playing it in the future, which is
yeah,
sometimes means taking a break now and not losing that passion. Like, if you're playing through a game for the first time and you feel a little burnt out because you've been playing it 12 hours a day for a week or something, like you just bought the new Spider-Man and you've played it 12 hours a day for a week, it's not that it's a bad game or you like it any less, it's just that you've been doing the same thing for a week straight, right?
yeah,
And it's the same with speedrunning, and people need to just chill out and let themselves enjoy it again. And that, I like, it almost feels like I'm starting to preach with this fucking talk
no,
show, but it's true, honestly.
yeah, no, like I think it was good that you posited the thing that I was going to posit, is that like you had the choice between getting the time and potentially ruining yourself forever with Rack 2, or just stepping away and making sure
Mm,
that you still had a chance of loving it again. And obviously you made the right choice there, and everyone, when confronted with that choice, needs to think about the future more than anything, because it's
yeah.
speedrunning is never about the now.
Oh, never
Like
is.
people think
Heck, you
this is the
might
last.
grind and get that record and have a 20-second time save a week later anyway.
Yeah, like that's always the perspective you need to think about, is the future. And you need to always think, what's the game going to be like in 3 years? Do I want to be there for it? Or do I want to ruin it now for myself and just like conceal myself off as a part of history in this route? Like,
Yep.
some people are content with that. Some people love the game for a route. And I dig that because, yeah, sometimes a route is just so perfectly tuned to exactly what you want as a speedrunner. But a majority of runners, I think, especially at the top level, they want to be there. They love the game more than anything.
Yep.
And they want to be a part of whatever the future is. So always think
Mm.
about what conserves yourself for the future. Even if you lose record now or you don't get that particular minute barrier, you might be the part of something that's
Bigger and better.
much, much better. Yeah.
I feel like people don't understand that just because you're not running doesn't mean you're still not passionate. I have an insatiable curiosity with the games that I run. Like,
Yep.
even for the last 4 months, I have barely picked up a controller. I have barely touched Rack 2. And I can tell you, I've still been checking the Ratchet Discord several times a day for that
Yeah.
curiosity of, oh, has something new been found? God, I hope something new's been found, right? And that's because I love the game and it's exciting, right? And that sort of leads me into my next question in that with Todd, you've touched on it a bit today, and I know we've talked about this a little bit in the past, but would you say that you forced yourself to play it and that killed, as we said, the possibility of you enjoying it in the future? Like, if you had stopped at that point where you were frustrated, do you think you could have returned in the future? For example, when Killer
God,
or Torpedo got better at that game and, had some
that's.
crazy different arc? Or do you think that in reality, for you, you probably would have stopped regardless for that
I
game?
think. I think I would have stopped regardless because it was probably like 70% the game and 30% the situation I was sort of in life.
Yeah, okay.
But
So, as in stopped in terms of you wouldn't have touched the game again, or stopped because
yeah,
of
I wouldn't have had the same drive. Like I probably would have played the game again. I would
yeah,
if I
less
never
anti-Todd than you are now?
yeah, if I never went back to NG Plus until I felt comfortable with it, instead of doing it as obligation back when the JP PS3 stuff was found and whenever Killer beat my records and stuff, like I feel like I would probably still be more fond of it.
Mm,
But yeah, that's a tough question. But I think it is. I think it is very much rooted in I forced myself to play the wrong time in
yep.
my life, and I was just so saddled with the negative. Just
It's a negative association for you now,
yeah,
which is
and it's
another
just
interesting point because it's sometimes not even the game. It's just, hey, life was
yeah,
pretty shit at this time and it was my escape. But playing it feels like you're almost falling back into that because of the
yeah,
association.
yeah. That is a part of it, and that is something that we haven't really mentioned as well. Like it's fine to not like a game because of an association you have,
Oh,
whether
for
it's
sure.
a part of your life or trauma or anything like that's something that is like that's beyond speedrunning.
Mm.
That's something that's bigger, and
It's
you need to
interesting
take
as
that
well
seriously.
because there's also the flip side of it. Um, for me, like I'm almost the exact opposite of you. It sounds like in this topic
Yeah,
because you associate it with a hard time, and so you don't want to touch it. For me, all of the hard times I've had in the past like 5 years, my escape was Rack 2, and because of that, it feels really comfortable. And
yeah,
so,
yeah,
for me, if I was going through a hard time again, I would probably default to Rack 2. I'd probably start up a new grind with some arbitrary, crazy goal for no real reason, and I would enjoy it, right? Because it would be my escape. But even if I'm not going through a hard time, I can still enjoy it because of how it made me feel at those times when life was hard. And it gives
hmm
me that, like, sort of at ease feeling, which feels more special because it was, of course, during times when that was hard to come by, right?
yeah. That's so interesting. Like again, there's no one size fits all when it comes to speedrunning and mentality and all that. Like things that we mentioned here, they might not work for half the people that want to
In
take
fact,
advice
I
from
would go
this.
as far as saying half the people that hear any of the advice in this video, what we've said will not work for them because they are a different type of person.
Yeah, but like this is just what's worked for us, and obviously the difference we're finding right here is like our associations with games,
Mm.
and like I I can never speak for other people when it comes to their associations with how they want to tackle speedrunning and all that. Like it's just interesting with Todd in particular for me because that was my first like speed game or
Or
like
speed run.
yeah, like I had done speedrunning before then, but it was more in terms of like time trials and ILs and stuff, which I still enjoy today. But Tub was my first full game speedrun that I dedicated myself to.
Mm.
And that's why it felt so bitter for me to have to let it go
Mm.
because there was so much association with it that was good that was getting weighed down by how much I was just defaulting to it in like my worst moments.
This
And
actually leads into an interesting question, right?
yeah,
Because what you're sort of touching on is, or at least how I'm sort of interpreting what you're saying, is like if life hadn't been so rough, you could in fact still be a Todd player. Am I sort of correct in that?
yeah, like if I was able to like have a better sort of period of time when I was, 18 or 19 or whatever, when I was like feeling so awful about it, I think I would probably be so much more positive with how I was speedrunning and approach things in terms of Todd. But it's something I don't want to linger on
Mm.
because
Because it's
I
not a
don't know how it.
situation you'll know.
Yeah, because it's not something I know how I'd react to, and like I can only think about the games that I did still keep with me
Yeah.
afterwards because I had started them later. I'd started them at a point where I still felt like I was enjoying them and finding things that I never thought I would ever find in them. Especially games like Into the Nexus, where that was sort of the last thing in 2018 that I had finally like climbed the mountain of and went, okay, that's something I want to keep going with. I found that it was just something that was so much better associated with positive feelings than Todd was at that time.
Yeah.
So maybe it is just like a particular game and just like your life will influence how you think about a speedrun.
Mm. I'm gonna lead that into something a little less heavy-hearted
Yes.
um, as we start to sort of close it out here because leave it on a positive vibe sort of thing. But what I want to ask, I think I'm a case study of this actually, is in how many cases do you think people that stick with their, well, rather, let me reword this. People often stick with the first game they play. They might play some others and come back to it.
Yeah.
And I think there is a sense that people think they want to speedrun, and as a hobby, I think it's almost more of an outline. There are very few people that I see that truly enjoy speedrunning as a whole and want to run all of these different games and just want to experience improving in all these different games. You get a lot more people, I think, that are like me that maybe dip in a few different games and they return back to their first game or they find their one game and they enjoy
Mm.
speedrunning that game. They don't enjoy speedrunning as a whole. And I think that's more common. That's going to be my take that that's more common. What are your thoughts?
Ooh. I think there's been a pendulum swing with this because in the earlier days of speedrunning, it was just one category people would run of a game, and
Yep.
that would be their category that they'd run, and people would know them on SRL as the guy who runs Crash 2 no game over abuse, right?
Yep.
Or Crash 3 105%. Like, that's just how I associated people in my mind, and that's just sort of what they ran. And over time, I feel like there has been a bigger emphasis on diversifying who you are to be a better runner and accepted in the community as someone that isn't a one trick or whatever. There is like a culture shift that sort of happened there.
Mm.
And sometimes I felt like that was a really good thing because it actually got people to broaden their horizons and actually find the type of game that they truly enjoyed. Because sometimes people start with a game and that's not actually the game that they love the most as a run, even if it's the game they just were attracted to start speedrunning. You know,
Yep.
similarly, I feel like I was the same. I feel like the more I got into Ratchet and Clank and other games that I've tried to run, like I just felt out the type of speedrun that I actually wanted to stick with. Um, but nowadays, I feel like people are reverting back to running a particular game or just one category. Like you have people who just run Spyro 180%, and they will do that for ages and ages to the end of time, you know? And but that's just what they love, and they know that. They're so self-confident in it. And I can sense that they are right. That is just the game that they know is their speed game. And
I think this is interesting because I am a definite example of this, in
yeah.
that I branched out and I realized that the game I wanted to play actually was not the first game I ran. This is a bit of FeaR's lore. Most people don't realize this. I learnt about half of the Quake route. That was my first speed run because I was a Counter-Strike player. I was a big B hopper. I was a very high level B hopper back in the day. And I went, hey, Quake's basically B hopping. Fuck it, let's try it. And then I realized that as a speed game as a whole, that was a lot less interesting than I thought.
Yeah.
And then I saw Ratchet and I was like, holy crap, that's cool. And I ended up starting with Ratchet 2. And every time I tried a different game, I was like, this just doesn't have the same appeal to me. I think I just got lucky in that the one that I chose first, Rack 2, was the one which suits my style. As somebody who, again, was not a console gamer growing up, so I had to really learn how to use a controller as well. And for some reason, Rack 2 just clicked with me and I love it. And I don't really consider myself a speedrunner these days. I consider myself a Ratchet 2 runner because even this recent stint over the last few weeks where I tried to play Ouya, I enjoyed it for a couple of weeks. Didn't really even do that many runs. Some of that is just life stuff, just being too busy, and maybe if I had a better
Mm.
circumstances, I would have enjoyed it more. But even then, the whole time, I didn't really think I enjoyed it even like half as much as I did Rack 2 at any point in time, right? Like,
Yeah.
for some reason, and I couldn't even probably tell you why. I thought it was to do with corridors and map design and game engine and fluidity of the movement and stuff like that. But in hindsight, I don't think that's true. I don't actually think I could tell you why Rack 2 is just the game that clicks for me, and I'm sure there are
Yeah, no,
plenty of people like that.
yeah, it's intuition. Like I see people who say it, and someone will challenge them and say, "Hey, but why haven't you run this game in the series?"
Because
Or,
I don't fucking want to.
yeah,
It's
that's
that
pretty much
simple.
it, right?
My brain
If you're
doesn't give me
enjoying it,
endorphins.
yeah, like if you're enjoying it and it's something that you just love to death already, like you don't need to branch out. Then
Exactly.
I get it.
But then you've got people like Marathon Man who just enjoy playing every which game they can get their hands on. They love just speedrunning like as a
Yeah,
hobby in its purest form, which is just get playing a game, learning the route and just getting better and better and going, "Hey, I'm happy with this time, play a different category." Like, and I think that it's almost like, to me, it feels so foreign because I could not imagine myself doing that. To me, it's always been, well, of course I'm going to try and get as good as I can. Maybe when I first got into Rag 2 speedrunning, I was like, oh, I maybe probably won't go to world record because I probably can't. I had the doubt at the time, of course. Everyone always does have that doubt.
yeah, of course.
Um, but inherently, that was like my end goal. I was like, but I'm going to get a pretty good time. Of course, I'm a perfectionist, so it was never good enough. But like, so to me, the
Still
idea
isn't.
still isn't. Yeah, I'm still not happy with any of my times. But yeah, no, as I said, that's so foreign that people actually get fulfillment out of, I guess, essentially stopping before world record. Like, it's a weird idea to me that people can, not weird as in bad, like hell yeah, do whatever the fuck you want. It's your hobby, right? But
Mm,
um, it's something that I can never truly understand how people can just jump between categories and get their goals and just dip, and it's fulfilling for them. As
yeah.
fulfilling or more fulfilling than anything I'm doing in speedrunning. Like, That is foreign to me. Truly foreign.
Yeah. But again, like, even if you don't like, even if that's not you, you still appreciate it, of course, because
Oh, sure.
that's there is no one way to speedrun. Like, it's such a it's not like learning an instrument or like learning the mechanics of like a hobby or something in a particular way, because like other hobbies I should say, because every game is so different. Every game is like
Mm,
learning a new instrument, really. Like, and sometimes you're just attracted to a particular style of run, or you're sometimes someone who just loves the idea of just having a timer on as you play a game, and that's just what you love about it. You just love having a timer and just
probably
letting your heart
similar.
fly.
Probably similar to how people pick sports. I think a lot of the time people can't explain why they like like sport. I
Yeah,
couldn't tell you. Well, I have some ideas. I know that I fucking hate team sports as a whole, but even that's not true. I've been liking doubles recently, right? So again, I'm questioning. I'm like, why do I like tennis? I couldn't tell you. So
yeah,
it's very similar there, and I've been talking to people about it recently, where it's like, why do you like soccer or why do you like football? And they're like, when I really think about it, I can't give you an answer. And that is interesting. I mean, that gets into the human psyche and like what hobbies are and all that you just
yeah.
sometimes don't know. But like, yeah, no, it's intriguing to me. Truly intriguing. But
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably a good point to end it off. I looked over and I saw that we've been talking for an hour and 26 minutes.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, thank you so much for joining me. We've had truly a very entertaining and enlightening discussion. And now I'm going to want to do this every single day and become Joe Rogan, the speedrunning podcast extraordinaire.
Oh, God, no.
But yeah, no, thank you for joining me. We'll have to have you on the show again. But yeah, thank
No,
you.
that was a lot of fun. That was really insightful. That actually got me to think about a lot of the ways that I was sort of approaching games back then.
Mm.
Yeah,
So I
that
mean, we've
was
had plenty of discussions, and yet that was still
yeah,
unique.
yeah. That was. I feel like we talked about a lot of things that we never truly got into beforehand. So
Mm. I
that's
knew they'd
good.
pick your brain. And to
Yeah,
everybody
whatever,
who
man.
listened to this, give me some feedback. What you think? If you have some questions, some things you want me to talk about, or even some people you want me to talk to, maybe somebody we talked about in this video, feel free. Leave your suggestions. And chances are I'll probably get to them because I'm really not creative and I need the help. I'm being real. But yeah, no, thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you in the next one.
Bye.